Mindful Coach podcast. So welcome to this edition of the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill. This episode, I'm so happy that we have the Zen Rabbit herself, Lori Saitz. We had such a great conversation the other day about business and marketing and coaching and how do coaches get involved with or get better aligned with putting the word out about who they are, and then also bringing that to the business community. And she has so much knowledge and wisdom to share in that world. So I thought she'd be a great guest for the show. So welcome, Lori, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. And so just by way of introduction, she helps entrepreneurial professionals who hire her to boost their business success and achieve life goals faster without working harder. And that's the key point there, right? With a comprehensive background in marketing layered on top of wellness and communication strategy, she helps business people improve their focus and productivity so they can move projects forward faster with less trauma and drama. I love that. Less trauma and drama. She said less stress and drama, but I thought I'd put the rhyme in there. She is the founder of Zen Rabbit and the host of Fine is a 4-letter word, where she engages guests in conversations about how they've grown from a time in their lives when they were not so fine. She's currently having a wonderful adventure, living the life of nomad, cat sitting around the Northeast, or to the Southeast and the Northeast too, I think. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, because I know we all are, she loves cupcakes, Thai food, and classic rock. So what a fabulous introduction and crazy story you've got for a life. How did you wind up in the business of helping business people?
Wow. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher. But back then, the only model of teacher was like a teacher in a classroom in elementary school kind of thing. And then fast forward all of these years, and that's really what I'm doing is teaching, but in a whole different realm, this whole helping entrepreneurs, helping business leaders to do what they do better and with less stress. And so, it's been a long and winding road.
I'll bet. And so somehow, though, you wound up with an orientation that you wanted to take this into business. So I don't know where you started or your backstory on that. I read from your website, you started out with a kind of fairly entrepreneurial background, it seemed like, from the beginning. And somehow, though, this pivoted to, or somehow that came into focus that I need to be helping people in business with their specific things. So how did that get dialed in?
Well, first of all, my dad was always an entrepreneur. So I had that as a role model. Although he had full-time jobs, even when he had a full-time job, he would always have a side gig that, was bringing in extra money, allowing him to do something else on the side. So I had that as a role model. For the first many years of my career, I worked for other people. I was an employee, but most of the companies I worked for were very entrepreneurial. And then in 2003, I started my first business, and I was making and marketing a product called the Gratitude Cookie, kind of a cross between a butter and a sugar cookie based on a family recipe. And with my background in marketing, I thought, I'm not out to be the next Mrs. Fields. I want to create a product, something that businesses can use to say thank you to their clients and to people who send them referrals.
I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I really started working with businesses. And most of my clients were smaller entrepreneurial type businesses, a lot in the financial services and commercial insurance, commercial and residential insurance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you started off with baking cookies for businesses to give to clients, which is a really cool niche to be in. I know when I was working in the corporate world, we would do that. We would have a customer sign a big contract, and we'd send them all kinds of goodies and stuff. So it's an interesting spot to be in. That's a long way, however, from saying, I'm going to help you be less stressed out about your work. So you got comfortable in the business, like here's how you negotiate, and here's the deal, and here's how you market. How is it that you begin to feel like you've got something to offer people that can be really helpful?
Yeah. So the cookies were called gratitude cookies.
Yeah.
And so because the gratitude cookies, I was also talking a lot about gratitude and using
Gratitude.
gratitude
Yeah.
in business and how gratitude can help you as a differentiating factor. It's very uncommon for businesses to do nice things for their clients or for people who support their success, for their teams, whatever it is. So I was getting a lot of opportunity to do presentations and to talk about gratitude, and not just gratitude as a nice thing to do, like good manners. Like, my mom taught me to write thank you notes after holidays and birthdays. Right. That's the nice thing. That's the right, quote unquote, right thing to do. But beyond that, what are the statistics? What's the science and research behind how gratitude works and how it helps business? And there's a lot of research and science behind it. But 20 years ago, when I started that business, I felt like I was a little bit ahead of my time.
Well,
And
you
now,
were, because you say there's a lot of research, but there wasn't 20 years ago on that.
There was some, but there wasn't as much as there is now, for sure. And yeah. And so after 11 years, I ended up shutting that business down because I couldn't scale it the way I would have liked. And that is code for I cannot make money. I could never get it profitable. And so I ended up shutting it down and then doing some other stuff back in marketing world. But fast forward to now, we're in pandemic, and somebody I knew from back in the cookie days asked me to do a presentation on gratitude, virtual presentation at that point, because it was like April of 2020. And that pulled me back into talking about gratitude, but on an even bigger scale, not just as it relates to business, but as it relates to life. How does it rewire people's brains? And to rewire your brain, gratitude. And then I started expanding out from that and creating customized meditations, which I see the two going very closely hand in hand, because both of those practices rewire the brain in a way that helps you be more successul with less stress.
So to elaborate on that a little bit, how is it that these mindfulness these meditations and how is it that does actually help you be more successful?
Right. So for one thing, if you're practicing meditation, for example, or gratitude, I mean, a lot of the studies overlap in terms of what the benefits are. It helps you be more emotionally, what's the word? Emotionally mature. What's the emotional
intelligent?
Intelligent. That's the word. Thank you. Yeah. It helps you be more emotionally intelligent. So you are more clued into you have more focus. And if you have more focus, then you can pay better attention to things like what your client is saying to you. Or if you're trying to do some work and you're trying to put together a proposal and you are better able to focus, it will take you less time to do it. It'll take you won't be as distracted, which is a big thing for a lot of people. The distractions in your head are what are pulling you away from getting things done. Like, you're still thinking about the argument that you might have had with your partner, or the conversation you need to have with your dad about taking away his car keys because he just can't drive anymore. And, and these are the things that are taking over your mind when you're trying to do your work. So if you are practicing gratitude, if you're practicing meditation, it's helping your mind to be more focused, even when you're outside of meditation. It helps you be more effective. It helps you, as we said, the emotional intelligence, so you don't get pulled into conflicts as quickly, or if at all. It teaches you how to respond instead of react impulsively.
Yeah.
And so then you're not having to go back and, I really shouldn't have said that. Now I need to backtrack.
Clean up. And damage control is always harder,
Exactly.
Totally is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what about,
and then there's,
go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask you, do you find people are resistant, businesses are resistant to, like, isn't it like too woo for them, this whole thing?
A lot of it, sometimes it is. But like we said earlier, there's now so much science and research behind it. And that's where I come in. And I think one of my unique abilities is to kind of mesh together and translate or interpret that woo-woo with the practical business side of things. There was a study, I think it was a Harvard study. I need to look it up about what exactly it was, that showed that people will work 60% harder for a boss who shows gratitude for them. Those are the kinds of things that affect businesses for real. Like, you can't just go, oh, well, gratitude, showing my appreciation, saying thank you to my employees is a nice thing to do. Like,
it doesn't cost you anything and it gets you productivity. So yes,
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Right. So those are the kinds of things that we're seeing now. And so it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you do that?
Right, exactly. Right. I mean, you and I, like in the seat of like people helping people with this stuff, it's kind of like, why aren't you focusing on this? It's the best thing ever is going to change your life. And I get on my own soapbox here. It's like, if just 10 minutes a day on this is going to radically up level everything in your life, why wouldn't you do it? And it's like, no, I got to go to the store. It's kind of, people just don't get it,
Right. And some of the other stuff I just pulled up, the number one reason why people leave jobs is they don't feel appreciated.
There you go.
So the companies that are talking about retention, hey, that's
exactly.
Big
so
thing.
There's a path to retention.
Yeah. It enhances productivity. It was, and then there was a study at University of Pennsylvania that said that people who practiced gratitude were 50% more productive than those who did not. So whether you're working for somebody else or not, if you want to be more productive,
right.
Gratitude.
And so gratitude was the gratitude from the gratitude cookies to helping people learn to have more gratitude in their work and by extension their life. It was your kind of your pathway there.
Yeah, exactly. And go ahead. I was going to say there's.
Well, I was just, I have a million questions. I'm so sorry if I don't mean to interrupt you.
It's all good.
For the coaches that we have in the audience and professionals out there, a lot of them are really, really good at what they do, but they didn't have a path from being in business to doing business with business that was wired in for them because of just for whatever journey they happen to discover that they're actually really good and they have something to offer and they want to help people, but they don't necessarily have the connections to be invited into conversations to be able to help people, and that leading into engagements for them in the business world. And this is something we talked about before, so I wanted to be sure to bring it in. It's like, how would you help a coach, or what would you say to our audience and people who are like in that seat of like, well, yeah, I've got stuff I'd love to be able to market this to business. What should they begin to think about, organize around, and plan for if they really wanted to begin to engage other businesses with their offerings?
Yeah, this is a great question, and we did discuss it earlier, and I'm so happy when we brought it up here because it took me a hot minute to figure it out too. And I had some coaches who helped me. I mean, coaches having coaches, like Olympic athletes have coaches. Everybody needs one.
Yeah.
So the key is figuring out what is the big problem that you're solving. Coaches especially, tend to look at like, here's what I can do for you. Mm-hmm. But the people you're talking to, maybe they don't want to clear their limiting beliefs. Like they don't even know what that is. They're like, they don't wake up thinking I need to do that. What is the big problem that they think they have? There's this saying, sell them what they want and give them what they need.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So another way to think of it might be like, what are they going to Google for help with, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or what is, and I really don't love the phrase of like, well, what's keeping them up at night? Like, yeah, you hear that a lot. but really, what is the big problem that you are solving? So for example, when I'm coming in, I'm not coming into corporate saying, hey, let me teach you about gratitude and meditation. Like, they don't want that. But what they do want is they want to know how they can get their employees to be more engaged, how they can improve retention, how they can improve focus, how they can improve innovation and productivity, all of which lead to profitability, which is what they want. So you have to learn how to speak their language.
And so what I hear you saying there is that you're phrasing the benefits to the business. Like, what's the payoff for the business point of view, not the personal point of view? Like, I'm going to help you be more calm and creative. Well, why does a business care about their employees being more calm and creative? You know, if you're dealing with a suite of writers, that could be a big deal. But so that could be one of the how should I say, learning points for coaches and other professionals who want to do business with business, is realizing that if you're going to call it the pitch, you know, your offer has to be positioned in such a way where it appeals to the benefit for the company and not so much the individual.
Right. Exactly. And then the other difference that I have learned is that when you are, and that is true whether you're working with companies or individuals, whether you're selling to companies or individuals, they don't necessarily think the same way that you do in terms of what their problem is. And so figuring out what is it that they are saying? What are the words and the phrases they're using to describe their issue?
That's, I think, really well said. Like, what are the literal words and phrases that they are saying? And so in my own work with other coaches and coaches who've helped me as well, I know one of the things they sent me to is like tasks to actually talk to people and just record and write down the key phrases, the key language that they use to describe what their issues are. And then craft your offer, if you will, around that language.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. In fact, just the other day, I went into a few different LinkedIn groups and asked the question, what are the phrases, words and phrases that you are hearing your clients or you're hearing used in your own company? These were groups for HR people and training and development people. What are the phrases that you are hearing people use to describe the challenges they're facing right now? And one of the phrases that somebody shared was innovation fatigue, which I had not heard before.
Innovation fatigue.
Right. They're being asked to innovate constantly, and more innovation, and it's wearing them out.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote an entire LinkedIn newsletter article, an article for my LinkedIn newsletter about that. And I had people reaching out to me saying, I kind of made up a fictional story, or I took a story and fictionalized it, let's say. And had people reaching out to me saying, hey, I can relate to that guy. I called him Nathan. They're like, I can relate to Nathan. So I knew I hit a pain point.
Yeah, right. So something's alive, because that's one of the pieces of advice that I had from people when I started marketing with, and it's like they would say, like, when they read your copy, they go, "That's me," and you can really relate to them that way. Now, that's a little bit different, because when we're talking about businesses, in my experience, and I don't have much experience to be, transparent in selling mindfulness stuff too directly to businesses. I do have a background in selling technical things to businesses, and I got pretty good at that, if I don't mind me saying, selling to Fortune 500, basically internet security training, which I had developed. But I learned some things along the way. And one of the things I learned was that the people that needed the information had a different language, had a different pitch to them than the people who were buying the courses. The people who were buying the courses were sitting in some task where their job was to get a course that does something they want. Whereas the people who were sitting in the course had a different set of needs completely. So I almost had two sets of pitches in a way. One was to the buyers and one was to the participants.
Right, to the buyers first, and then once you were presenting the information that the buyer had purchased,
yeah, well, and sometimes it would be like I would be talking to the lead of the department who's going to consume it, and then I would have to pitch them on the value, and then they would go, and then I get a whole different another series of questions from these guys who were consuming. So it was kind of a handoff. They wanted to proof the value first. So my question is, how do coaches or other professionals who are listening, and they want to get started with reaching the right kind of people, do you have any advice or insight as if you're not well grounded in that world, how do you even begin to make those contacts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. LinkedIn is the place, I believe, to start with. Professionals are there, but what I'm also finding is that a lot of times the people who are working in corporations are so busy. They're being asked to do so much and they only have the same amount of time that everybody has. And so they're not spending necessarily a lot of time on social media, on LinkedIn. And so it's figuring out ways that you can be succinct in your messaging and capture their attention right away, because they don't have time to listen to a 4 or 5 minute pitch.
Right.
You got a few, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. But start building relationships there. Going to networking events. Everybody thinks that after pandemic, everything can be done online, and it can't. It's a different. In fact, just last night I went to the Association of Training and Development. I'm in Durham, North Carolina right now, and the Raleigh chapter, or I guess they call it the Research Triangle area, whatever. They had an in-person happy hour thing that I went to and made some really good contacts. But that's where you can go to get in front of people is, whether it's an association networking event, any kind of in-person place where you can meet executives or the people who would be buyers for your services. And go and make those face-to-face connections. People are afraid to do that, but it's really I feel like it's the absolute best way to do it.
I so agree about that, in the sense that people tend to buy from who they know. And whenever you had a personal connection with somebody, it's so much more powerful than, I can't tell you how tired I am of, I love your profile and I can see you're doing great work. You want to meet about something? And I'm like, no, I don't.
Right. And you can get to know them on a different level. You're not there to, and so again, when you're at networking events like that, you're not there to pitch them. You're not going to walk away with a signed contract. You're there to make a connection and get to know them. And then the people that I connected with last night, I spent a little bit of today connecting with on LinkedIn and following up and saying, nice to meet you. We talked about this. You said you were going to introduce me to this person, kind of thing. But it's about building a relationship. It's not going to happen overnight.
So in terms of the gratitude coursework that you're doing, do you tend to, the kind of work that you're doing, does it tend to be individual executives and managers, or is it organizationally group focused, or how does that go for you? Or is it
both? I love doing workshops, especially again in person as opposed to virtual. Although I did do a virtual presentation yesterday for a group. So group workshops, and then I also am available to do what I call executive coaching. Executive coaching to help them on a more individual, personalized level.
And so whenever people are buying your services, do you tend to connect with the coaches or the executive first, or is it someone who's buying for those executives?
It's it's the training and development departments is where I've been targeting to go into, is training and development. Sometimes I am looking at managers individually, like maybe a sales manager or a sales director level is where I'll usually start. And
Why do
depending
you
on the
start
size of the
director?
company, sometimes if it's
Yeah.
a smaller company, it might be the CEO or the COO. But that would be a much smaller company.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these larger companies, people need to understand that a director at a large company is a big position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have multi-million-dollar budgets, often 1,000 people under them. Sometimes.
Right. And, so that's another piece of advice is like, pick who you want to go with. I'm right now not looking for Fortune 100 companies to get into.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if one happens to show up and somebody says, "Hey, I have an introduction for you," I'm taking it. But
Yeah, of course, right.
I'm not starting there.
Sure.
I'm looking at the smaller companies because the timeline, one, it will be easier to get in. Two, the timeline is shorter. When you're talking about a Fortune 100 company, it could be a very long timeline for them to get, you have to become an authorized, vendor and all of that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it can
Oh,
take
my
a
God.
while.
I forgot all about that nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. So dealing with the middle tier, small businesses, and by that, that's like 500 people or less, and that's a lot of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, it's a little easier to find, I think, the right person because there aren't so many seats, and they're big enough to have maybe a training department of some kind, and that'll be the right person regardless, right? Yeah.
Right. And again, I go back to LinkedIn because even if they're not spending time on LinkedIn, for the most part, they all have a profile on LinkedIn. So you can find them there, find out who that training and development director is, what's their name. Sometimes you can find it through their website, but again, searching on LinkedIn with the parameters that you can use on LinkedIn makes it a little bit easier to do that. And then so maybe go from LinkedIn to the website.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the other thing, what do you think about like when you reach out to somebody, what do you need to have? And they say, "Oh, I might be interested in you." What kind of back collateral or when they go to check you out, what needs to be behind that? Do you know what I mean? Because if it's just just reach out and you say, all you've got is your profile on LinkedIn, is that enough?
It can be because, and at the same time, your profile on LinkedIn needs to be what I call corporatized. So it needs to be in the language that a corporate executive would want to see. And what kind of proof do you have that you can do this? And so the other thing they may want is case studies. And when I first started, I was like, "Oh, but I don't have any case studies because I haven't done any work with corporate yet." It doesn't have to be a case study that has been with a company that you've actually worked with. And I'm citing all of this research and the studies. Those can be enough. Like you could put that into a case study.
Yeah, as long as you
look
don't
at my
claim it's
LinkedIn
your
profile,
work, you can say, "Here's a case study of gratitude, the impacts of gratitude for," right.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Like I can share that, there was a study published in the Applied Psychology, Health and Wellbeing organization that said, grateful people sleep better. And, or that one that we talked about at the University of Pennsylvania that people who practice gratitude are 50% more productive than the people who don't. Like those kind of things can be put into a case study.
I see. So you can have a case study. So you need a website, I guess, of some kind with your stuff, all this stuff to send people to, or would those just be links on a LinkedIn profile?
You could put it on a LinkedIn profile under the About section, under the, there are different sections in LinkedIn that you can put it into. I have mixed feelings I have heard different things about whether you need a website or not. I've heard from some experts in getting corporate gigs that you don't need a website. You just need a LinkedIn profile. But my experience has been that people will go to my website in addition to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be a 10-page website. have some, even if you have just one page that highlights your expertise and, again, how you help. What is the problem you solve and how do you do it? Or, you don't have to tell them, you don't have to tell them all the secrets. I'm not saying tell them all your secrets of how, but
yeah. I mean, when I was in the technical world, I've done some of the same things in the mindfulness world that I did when I was a technical guy, because I decided I wanted to be a name in a particular technology. And it turns out to be that's a lot easier to do in technology than it is in mindfulness. But my strategy was pretty straightforward, and that was to go find the top 10 things that people have trouble with that technology and write papers on it, and then put it out there and write a couple of things, what I call anchor content, right? And then that becomes my go-to. And then anytime somebody had a question, it was one of those, I could just send them to that and then they find all my other stuff. They go, oh, he's not only knows the answer to that one, he's got these 3 others that I also know and or am curious about. So you can quickly establish yourself as some kind of credible source for advice, technical advice that way. So similar sort of approach should be effective with this field, where you create in your niche several anchor pieces, at least one, maybe 2 or 3 that you can then use and constantly reference all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're positioning yourself as an expert. And that is a key piece, because I think a lot of coaches don't necessarily consider themselves experts. I've had colleagues or other people I know who are entrepreneurs, and they're like, well, I don't really want to call myself an expert because that just seems egotistical. You're the expert. If you know more than they do, Dan Kennedy is one of my marketing mentors, and he's like an OG in the marketing world. And one of the things I remember him saying was that if you are a first grader, if you're a first grader, you're not looking up to the 12th graders for advice. They're way too high for you. Somebody who's 1 or 2 grades ahead of you is who you look to. So you don't have to have, 12 years more experience than you have right now. You just need to have a little bit more experience than the person that you're selling to. You know, I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but if you know a little bit more than I do and you're going to sell me something, then you're the expert. Because I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part of this is, I really appreciate you saying that, it's like owning the truth of your own credibility. Yeah. It's like, if you're, a character like me, and I've spent a lot of time with some really, really talented folks who did their very best to kind of get some interesting information into my head, and then practicing it over a period of time, that actually results in hopefully some skill set that is useful to folk. And so, honoring the fact that you are putting a lot of time and energy into actually maybe saying, like, mastering your craft. And after you do that for a while, you have gotten somewhere with it. And you can look back and go, well, I may not be whatever you want to call an expert, but I'm certainly well informed about this. And just really stepping into the authority of that in such a way that other people can relax around the fact that they're dealing with someone who can really help them in this area.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I mean, portraying confidence.
Yeah. And being confident. So, it's like really stepping into it.
Even if you're scared, the whole thing about courage. I love talking about courage as well, because you mentioned it in my bio that I'm living nomad life, and people are always like, oh, you're so courageous to do that. And the whole definition of courageous, though, is not doing something because it doesn't scare you. It's, you could be scared and do it anyway.
And that
is courage. Right. Courage. Right. I mean, the origin of the word comes from heart, cor, in French, courage. Yeah. And so, finding it in your heart to do it anyway.
Yeah. And then I just really want to say that, like, to the coaches and professionals that are out there who maybe have a little problem kind of saying, yeah, I am actually competent in this area. It's like, at least sometimes when if I'm doing one-on-one work, because I teach coaches, and they go, well, I don't know if I'm ready. And I'll just ask this question. I'll say, do you think you can be helpful to people? And almost, the whole world of coaches say, yeah. And so that's all you need to know. Is that really true? Yeah, that's really true. Well, then own the fact that you can be helpful.
Yes. That is why we all need coaches, because that voice of doubt comes in and it's like, well, I don't know. And we as humans, I think, tend to get caught up in the, okay, but I don't know enough. I know some, I know more than you do as Mr. Client, but I don't really know enough to come in and do a workshop.
Yeah, I love that.
Let me get another certification. Let me study one more book.
Right, exactly. I've only got 7.
Right.
I just don't. I know at some point you have to go, well, I'm just going to try, because the only way you're really going to get to where you feel really super confident is by practice. And you're not going to practice unless you do it.
Doing the thing. You do not get experience by reading about it.
That's right.
You can get some knowledge, but you don't get experience. The only way you get experience is by doing the thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I always go back to this, like riding the bike, right? It's like you're going to get on the bike and you can study about the bike. You can look at a picture, you can watch YouTubes, but you've got to get on the bike. And then you're going to fall over and it's going to be awkward and it's going to feel like, this is not any good. I'm terrible at this. You have to get back on the bike, try again. And of course, that's a simple analogy, but it actually applies in a lot of ways, particularly in the world of mindfulness, because, often we're asking people to kind of check in with their own senses. And as soon as they do, they get in touch with the non-Zen Rabbit part of their world, the craziness of the inner world. They go, and they flee from that as fast as they can and write it down to, I'm no good at that. And so that's like falling off the bike the first time and going, oh, this bike is dangerous. I'm never going to get on it again. And if you don't, then you never get the freedom that you have from being able to ride around in a vehicle that can take you places that you've never been before.
Right. There's one more point I want to make for people who are listening as well. And this, again, applies especially to corporate, but in any selling situation. And that is to be persistent. People are busy, and maybe they saw your email, maybe they got your voicemail and they meant to respond and they didn't, or they didn't even see it. And I know there are sales statistics, and I don't know, that you need to follow up 7, 9, 1,000 times. I don't know what it is really, but 1,000 might be a lot.
It keeps moving.
Yeah, it's a moving target. The point is, it is definitely more than 5. And until somebody says to you, stop calling me, or I don't need your services, or please go away, or, they could be meaner about it for sure. Keep at it. Keep being persistent. I've had clients in the past that I've followed up with who have thanked me for staying persistent, because they did want what I was offering, but they just were so busy with other things, it got buried. Yeah.
I've had the same thing happen to people who show up for my courses, or they're just like, oh, I wanted to take it a year and a half ago. But I stayed on your list, and it finally happened. There's a guy who runs, shout out to this guy. I've got his name, but he has this whole thing called 7 second website, the 7 second website. And the thing I like about this guy is his stuff is extremely straightforward, and you can tell his whole pitch is people need to be able to tell what you're doing in 7 seconds. And he has this email list that you sign up for, and he gives one email. He does an email every day. And it's just a short little piece. And his whole pitch is, 365 emails. He says, I set it up like in 2 weeks, and I just click go. And everybody hears from me every day really quickly. And then whenever they're ready to do business with me, I'm always top of mind because I'm in their inbox every day. And it's not like long read. It's like to the point and very straightforward. I really like that approach because I can't afford the guy because he's too expensive for my work. But wow, what a great approach. And his website is really tight. And, so that's speaking to this persistence piece, just having a persistent presence and with the people that you want to is really a valuable way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What's on your horizons for you?
What's next for me? Well, I will eventually find a place to park myself and stop what my friend Tracy calls the kitty cat tour.
Right, because you're cat sitting, right?
I'm cat sitting, yes.
That's cat so sitting fun.
Across. Yeah. So I get to play with different cats and I get a place to stay. And it has been a lot of fun. And it's been 10 months now. So I am getting a little bit tired of not having a permanent place to park myself.
Sure.
So that's going to happen probably in the next 2 to 3 months. But what else is happening? I'm just so excited about being able to share this information with the business leaders who need it to be able to stay calm.
Yeah.
Even coaches, it's funny, especially because coaches probably need it more than anybody. Everybody needs it.
Exactly why we're here.
But coaches need coaches themselves, but who do you choose? And I love working with entrepreneurs because it's about asking them the right questions that they often are too close to see to be able to ask themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah. And so whether I'm helping them with marketing or with, I'll use the word mindset because we're talking to coaches, so they get what it is, but you don't use mindset in the corporate world. But helping people to kind of get out of their own way.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. That's so great. So how do people find you and coaches that are listening and they want some advice and some guidance from where you've been and what you're doing? How do they find you?
We mentioned LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn is a very easy way to find me. Yeah. And my website. My website is zenrabbit.com. It's really easy. My first company was, when we were talking about the cookies, it was Zen Rabbit Baking Company. And then I couldn't change the name of the company because it was so memorable that people didn't remember me, but they remembered the name Zen Rabbit.
Zen Rabbit.
Zen Rabbit. Zen Rabbit is my license plate. It has been the license plate in 2 different states. So find me on Zen Rabbit.
There we go, Zen Rabbit. And I'll put the LinkedIn link also in the show notes. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing and, helping executives of the world and the business leaders of the world be more whole and be more grateful in their lives. Is such important work, and for your insights on how our coaches and our professionals can do more business with businesses. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Brett.
Thank you. The Mindful Coach Podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.